He stood at the altar, hands cold, heart racing like a wild horse. In front of him stood a woman he had never met, overweight, nervous, with eyes that looked down. Avoiding his, her dress didn't shine like others, her hands trembled slightly, and every guest whispered behind their fake smiles. He wanted to run, to scream, to disappear. But he couldn't. He had no choice. His father's last words still echoed in his mind. You must marry her if you want your inheritance. He felt like a prisoner in his own life. She wasn't what he dreamed of. She wasn't the love story he had imagined. Yet, there she was, his bride. Forced, unknown, and yet, something about her felt different. As the priest began speaking, he looked at her once more. That one glance would change everything, because what happened after this wedding, no one could have expected. In the heart of a dusty old western town, where horses echoed through the empty streets, and the wind carried secrets no one dared to speak. Ethan, a 28-year-old man known for his charm, strength, and soft heart. But today, none of that mattered. His world turned upside down when he opened his late father's will. The words felt like a bullet. To receive your inheritance, you must marry the woman I've chosen. Ethan stared at the letter, fists clenched, unable to breathe. He didn't know her name, had never seen her face. Yet his entire future now depended on this one impossible decision. He felt betrayed, trapped in a cruel joke he couldn't escape. It wasn't love. It wasn't fate. It was a contract written in guilt and obligation. And as the wedding day approached, one question haunted him deeply. What kind of woman could be worth giving up his freedom for? Ethan didn't say a word as they left the chapel. His jaw was tight, steps heavy, eyes blank. Martha, now his wife, walked beside him in silence, holding her white dress slightly above the dirt path. People stared. Some smiled, most whispered. Why would someone like Ethan marry her? The words weren't loud, but they cut deep. Martha heard them. She always did. But she had mastered the art of hiding pain. At home, Ethan opened the door, walked in without looking at her, and disappeared into his room. No welcome, no warmth, just cold silence. The next morning, she woke early, cooked breakfast, and waited. He came out, saw the food, didn't touch it, not a single word. Days passed. She cleaned, cooked, folded his clothes, even tried asking about his day, but he responded with nods or silence. Her smile slowly faded, not because she expected love, but because she had hoped for kindness. Nights were the hardest. She slept on the edge of the bed, facing the wall, pretending not to hear when he returned late and dropped his boots on the floor with frustration. In town, the gossip only grew louder. She's not pretty enough for him. Maybe it's for money. What kind of woman traps a man like that? Martha heard it in the market, at the well, even from children playing outside. She would smile faintly, nod politely, and walk away. But behind closed doors, she sat alone, stared at her hands, and asked herself the same question. Why me? Ethan, meanwhile, fought a battle inside his chest every time he looked at her. He remembered his father's words, and it filled him with bitterness. He didn't hate Martha, he hated the situation. But instead of facing the pain, he buried it beneath silence. One night, while passing by her room, he paused. The door was slightly open. She sat on the floor, sewing a torn curtain. There was no music, no joy, just stillness. Yet there was something gentle in her eyes, something broken but brave. He watched for a moment, then walked away before she saw him. The next morning, the food was on the table again, hot, fresh, untouched. Ethan stared at it for a long time. His hands stayed still. His heart, though, felt something shift just a little, but he wasn't ready to admit it. Not yet. Martha continued living like a shadow in his home, present, but invisible. She never asked for love. She never demanded anything. But in her silence was a strength he hadn't noticed yet. The house remained quiet, the tension heavy, but underneath all that coldness, something had begun to crack. A change was coming, and neither of them knew. The next moment would test everything. The days continued in silent rhythm, cold but strangely calm. Ethan had grown used to Martha's quiet presence, her gentle footsteps, and the way she never once complained. Not even when he slammed doors or skipped meals. She simply existed, around him peacefully, without expectations. One rainy evening, Ethan was searching for a file in the attic, frustrated and tired. As he opened an old wooden chest filled with dusty papers, a small leather-bound diary fell out and landed near his boots. Curious, he picked it up. The cover was cracked, pages slightly yellowed. He flipped it open and froze. The first page read, "Martha Willow, my truth." For a moment, he hesitated. Then he sat down and began to read. With each line, his breath grew heavier. She had once been a young, vibrant girl, full of dreams, adored for her beauty and kindness. But everything changed the night her family's farmhouse caught fire. She was the only one who survived. Flames left deep scars on her back, legs, and her heart. The pain, both physical and emotional, was unbearable. She had stopped looking in mirrors after that. People who once praised her now looked away. And yet, she never let her soul turn bitter. Ethan turned the pages with shaking hands. She had written about his father to how he had visited her family many times before the accident. He had promised her dying parents that he would protect their daughter like his own. Years later, when his father realized his time was near, he made one final request to his son: marry Martha. Not out of pity, but out of duty. Because the world won't be kind to her, but you can be. Ethan dropped the diary in his lap. Stunned, the storm outside roared louder, but nothing compared to the storm inside him. All this time, he had judged her by appearances, by silence, by what the world whispered. He hadn't looked at her once with real eyes. Shame washed over him like cold rain. She wasn't weak, she was stronger than he ever could be. While he drowned in pride and anger, she lived with quiet courage. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring out into the dark, haunted by the weight of his ignorance. The next morning, he looked at Martha differently, not as a burden, not as a stranger, but as a human being carrying more pain than he had ever known. She was pouring tea at the table when he entered. For the first time, he said softly, "Good morning." Her hand paused for a second, surprised. She looked up, confused but calm, and simply nodded. It wasn't much, but it was something. The ice had cracked, and beneath it, something fragile and real had begun to rise. Ethan now knew the truth, but the question remained, could he undo the damage his silence had caused? The days that followed were quiet, but something had shifted. In the air, Ethan began to notice the smallest things: how Martha always folded his clothes with care, how she gently watered the dying plants near the porch, how she still smiled at the children in town even when their parents whispered cruel things behind her back. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, but slow, like a sunrise breaking through thick clouds. One morning, he offered to help her carry the water buckets from the well. She looked at him, surprised, then gave a quiet nod. It was the first time they walked side by side, without silence swallowing the space between them. That evening, when she cooked dinner, he sat near the kitchen and asked her what her favorite meal was. She blinked twice, unsure if he was joking, then softly replied, "Roasted corn with honey." The next day, he brought fresh corn from the market and tried roasting it himself. It turned out awful burnt and uneven, but when he placed it in front of her, she laughed, really laughed, and he found himself laughing too. It was the first sound of joy in that house since the wedding. Slowly, things began to change. Ethan started waiting at the table before meals, even complimented her cooking, helped her chop vegetables, held open doors, and sat with her in the evenings. One rainy afternoon, they played cards together, and when he lost, he laughed like a boy again. Martha smiled more now, and her steps felt lighter. The dark circles under her eyes faded, replaced by a soft glow that hadn't been there before. Townspeople noticed too. Whispers changed from pity to curiosity. "She looks different," they said. "Have you seen her smile lately?" Ethan saw it all, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her mother's garden, how her voice softened when she hummed while sewing, how she never spoke ill of anyone, not even those who hurt her. She had every reason to hate the world, but instead, she met it with grace. One night, while sitting near the fireplace, he told her, "You're stronger than anyone I know." Martha looked at him, confused at first, then lowered her gaze, cheeks flushed with quiet gratitude. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep again, but not from guilt. This time it was something else. Something warm, something new. He had married a stranger. He had ignored her, judged her, pushed her into shadows. But now, he was beginning to see her not just with his eyes, but with his heart. And he didn't just like what he saw, he respected it. Martha hadn't changed. She had always been this person. Ethan was the one who had finally begun to open his eyes. But even as their bond grew deep down, a new fear was rising. What if it was too late to make things right? Months passed, and with each sunrise, Martha grew bolder. One morning, she stood before Ethan and said she had signed up for the town's annual horse riding competition, something she hadn't dared to do since the fire. The entire town gathered, some curious, some doubtful. But when she rode into that field with grace and determination, silence fell. She rode not to win but to rise. Dust swirled, hearts pounded. And when she crossed the finish line first, the crowd erupted in cheers. Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he walked to her, placed his hand on her shoulder, and whispered, "You are the strongest woman I know." In that moment, it didn't matter how they started, the forced marriage, the silence, the pain. It all led to this love born not from perfection, but from healing. And as they stood hand in hand, under the open sky, one truth echoed in every heart watching. No one saw this love coming.